You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to, maybe even watching, the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 8/25/21. Well, one thing as a recovering attorney, I notice this constantly. There are so many statements about what people think the law is, what they think it should be, and things that you should do in accordance with their beliefs. And all too often, they are wrong. And this can have catastrophic effects on your business, on your life, on your family, on your finances. So right now we've got Scott Reib with us. And Scott is also a recovering attorney, recovering IP attorney. And so from one recovering attorney to another, Scott, I really wanted to go over some things and things that you do, kind of clear up the misinformation, the disinformation, and to give you out there a real idea of what your risks are in various endeavors, how you can minimize those risks, and how you can have the last laugh on overly litigious, frivolous plaintiffs, because God knows there's enough of them out there. And if you have any measure of success, you are a target. And don't kid yourself. They know it. And you better know it soon and take steps accordingly. If you got a question about this, you got an interest, you got a situation you're in, I'd like to hear from you. And Scott would too. Just send an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. So Scott, we kind of have gotten into the specialty of helping people more or less safeguard their lives, their assets, everything they worked for. And certain states, obviously, it's easier than others. Texas and Florida, much easier than, say, New York or New Jersey or other places. But before that, you were doing IP. How did the transition come about?
Well, I was doing a lot of, I had a pretty general practice doing litigation, intellectual property protection, and found that I kept having clients come in with huge problems. You know, the proverbial house was on fire. And usually it was things that if they would have just called me, had me look at the document, maybe create the document, the fire would never have happened. And so I started asking myself, why does this keep happening? Why don't they call me? And the reason was that my model wasn't working for them. I was billing by the hour like all the other lawyers were, and every time they called me, money flew out of their pocket. So they just would rather dial a friend, flip a coin, ask Google, than ask me. So I switched my model to a subscription plan where they're paying me a monthly fee for on-demand access, and now they start asking me questions. And so now we're not having these huge problems, we're having small problems that are marking the windshield and we can fix them later. And it's a much more enjoyable life for me. My clients like talking to me, and it's lowered the risk level for all of my entrepreneurial clients.
Okay, well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of bankruptcy, right?
That's right.
So what's the most common problem that you've encountered with business owners? And obviously, you and I, entrepreneurs, attorneys, so we kind of plan for this stuff, but even the attorney can go without a will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the cobbler's family has no shoes. Yeah, it's all too common. Well, what we see commonly, it's really not the complicated things that entrepreneurs are getting wrong. You know, they don't, a lot of people are still starting businesses as sole proprietors and then just running them that way. They don't have an LLC or a corporation at all. And that's a big problem. And then we see the other side of that is that they've got an LLC, but they used some online tool to create it and didn't create it appropriately, or maybe went halfway. And so then they get to a bump in the road and they don't have a clear operating agreement, and so the founders are at odds and they don't know how to move forward. Those are big problems. And then another problem is that you see really bad contracts where they've cobbled it together from things they could find online, done it themselves, and tried to move forward. And then you have all kinds of conflicting language, ambiguous language, or just holes that they didn't think of because they're in the middle of it. They can't see the forest for the trees. And those are kind of two big things we see. And I'll say the third one is no one's protecting their brand. They'll start building a brand and they don't protect it. Either they don't trademark it, they don't make sure it's trademarkable, and then they're not copywriting it. We work with a lot of online entrepreneurs, podcasters that are building things that they then are selling the content, and people are pirating it and they haven't registered it, so they have to back up, register it to be able to enforce it, and that can be another really big problem.
I can see that. So really, this just comes from people thinking that you could just ask Siri a complex legal question and somehow she's going to know the answer. And, if somebody asks me a question, I try not to give much free legal advice, but the first thing I say is I might give them an answer, but I'll say it depends, right? And that is the correct answer for virtually everything a client asks you. Here's the answer, but it depends upon your circumstances, your situation. That's nothing you can understand from the internet. It's all a lot more complicated. I just, look at people, they remember this expression. You have a person who represents themselves as a fool for a client and an idiot for a lawyer. And it's so true.
Yeah, like I just ran into a problem today with an entrepreneurial guy who had a successful company and been approached by a friend who wanted to start up a company. And so his successful enterprise was going to invest in this startup. And they were going to invest almost $500,000 into this startup as contributing capital. And the other person was just bringing their skills, experience, and some connections. And so they had their whole founder arrangement really messed up. They weren't getting enough equity for the capital they were putting in, and they hadn't even considered using a line of credit instead of all that capital so that they could have control over how much they had invested as the business started. And there's just simple things like that frankly you just don't think of on your own. You need that second set of eyes to help you with it, and if they can have legal expertise, even better.
And I know myself, when I have most things, I'm generally going to get counsel. I'm going to retain counsel because I don't want to do it myself, because the one thing you always have to realize, even if you're an attorney, is you're always emotionally engaged in your own affairs. And you need, like you said, that second set of eyes, that disinterested observer to look over your shoulder and let you know when you're doing something wrong.
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Goldterra Resource Corp is a gold exploration company that has assembled a highly prospective district-scale land position on the doorstep of the city of Yellowknife in Canada's Northwest Territories. Goldterra is currently focused on expanding and delineating gold resources at the company's Yellowknife City Gold Project, with a goal of discovering over 5 million ounces. With ready access to infrastructure and multiple high-grade gold discoveries, Goldterra is on track to re-establishing Yellowknife as one of the premier gold mining districts in Canada. Goldterra trades as YGT in Toronto and YGTFF on the OTC. For more information, go to goldterracorp.com. That's goldterracorp.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network. The information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Yeah, it's imperative if you're trying to grow a business. I mean, the business is their vehicle to achieve their life goal or dream. And to not get that second set of eyes from a legal perspective when you're building it, from an accounting perspective, tax perspective, you can't do all that yourself. You can't wear all the hats. You've got to have someone else helping you with professional expertise, and then you focus on what you're supposed to be focusing on, which is building your business.
Hey, it's like, look, and when you start getting advice from people, a close friend of mine, I got to tell you this one, got a self-directed IRA, and it doesn't really matter, but she bought a piece of property, and every month she has to send a requisition to the custodian to pay bills, and the custodian is really not very good at it. And I said, why didn't you talk to me? You would have set up an LLC. All right, it would be owned by the self-directed IRA, and then you're the manager, you're the managing member, you pay the bills, and you give them a statement at the end. You don't commingle. That's the worst thing you could do, because then you lose your tax deduction and your tax deferral. And she talks to her friend who owns some Airbnbs and some property in the self-directed IRA. You don't need that. Like, oh my God. I said, look, when your friend goes to law school, graduates, gets her degree, passes the bar in a couple of states, then take her advice. But otherwise, don't listen to her. I know this. I've studied it, and I wouldn't be telling you if I didn't. And that's one thing I know you as a multi-decade practicing attorney. If you don't know the answer to something, you say, wait, I have to find out, right?
That's right. And do that a whole lot.
I hope so. Well,
even after 25 years, there's just stuff I don't know or stuff I've forgotten. And so you have to go check before you give that answer. And then, like we were talking earlier, in the legal world, it's almost always it depends, because it depends on the specific circumstances. It depends on how someone else may respond or act. And so it's a real uncertain field, even for 2-decade plus lawyers. So just imagine if you don't have the education, training, experience, and you're trying to navigate these waters. It's just a nightmare.
And I always say, what you get for free is worth exactly what you paid for it, and is certainly with legal advice. And that's why I hate when people ask me. I'm not practicing anymore. I don't really want to give them any advice, because then they'll come back to me. For them to listen to the advice, they got to pay for it. They got to have skin in the game here. Otherwise, when you get free advice, it's too easy to ignore it.
I agree. You have to have some skin in the game. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, hey, when it comes to asset protection, like we were talking about, there is a world of sharks out there looking to take your stuff, basically. So you definitely, if you do it before you get sued, you can have a good chance of holding on to your stuff. But if you do it after you get sued, then it's like ballet, and you very well might not be able to accomplish protecting your assets, and you might lose it all.
Sure, and you and I've both seen it happen. And there's some basic things that you can do to be that pound of prevention. One is to make sure you're never running multiple businesses out of one entity. So if you're doing multiple things, separate them into multiple entities. And then you should also, in my opinion, not have your hard assets in your operating company. They should be in a holding company that's then leasing those assets for the operations. And so you may have multiple companies that are leasing assets from that holding company, and that's fine, but it only does business with your companies and has no exposure to the outside. So if something bad happens, you have to bankrupt a company, it doesn't have any assets, it just had cash flow, and you don't lose anything. You can start a new company and move on. I mean, I'm even advising a lot of my clients to put their intellectual property in these holding companies, such as their brand name, their trademarks, their copyrighted materials, so that they could then use them in other entities and not have them exposed. But most entrepreneurs are running with one LLC because they heard they had to have an LLC and think that solves all problems. And it solves a lot of problems. It makes it where you're not personally exposed, which is great. That's a good power move. But it doesn't protect your business assets. And without your business assets, you have nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you hear it all too often. I remember I interviewed somebody. They had a charter jet rental business, and there was a famous golfer who died in a plane crash as a result of, I don't think they did anything wrong. There was something wrong with the plane.
He was flying to Dallas to see my partner.
Oh, is that right? And this company, I think they were from the Midwest, basically got wiped out and had to start all over again. It was really heartbreaking. Really was hard.
Yeah, it was. And there's going to be certain liability events that you just can't avoid, and that's what insurance is for. And I always advise all of my entrepreneurs to make sure that you have all the insurance you can afford, because you don't want to get into a liability event and it really was your company's fault or your fault, and you're not able to meet that obligation. So make sure that you're working with a reputable insurance broker that can tell you what kind of coverage you need, so that if there is negligence, there's something that can stand between you and that person to make it right.
Yeah, if they had just had the right corporate structure, maybe a trust thrown in here and there,
Maybe.
they would have lived to fight another day. At least their personal assets might have been safe, right?
Yeah, and you bring up another great topic, is that we talk about trust a lot for estate planning purposes, and they're a great tool for that. But that's the living trust or the irrevocable. A lot of entrepreneurs are starting to use the irrevocable trust to own their businesses as an asset protection tool. And the great benefit to it, if you can set it up right, and someone else generally needs to create it for you, then you use the trust that was created for you. You're the beneficiary and trustee to start these businesses, and they're not your personal assets, so they're not subject to your personal liability. And you can grow all these assets, and there are also some really good tax advantages if you can work with a really smart CPA or tax lawyer to take advantage of them. But from an asset protection standpoint, if you're operating out of a trust and you haven't commingled the funds, so you haven't put your funds into this trust, you're as bulletproof as you can get from an asset protection standpoint. It's a little bit complicated setting it up, but in the long run, it pays really big dividends.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's a little complicated. You might not understand it just hearing it for the first time.
You bet.
But if you're involved in any kind of business where there's a potential for liability, you need to seriously think about this, because it can be your financial savior for sure. So I guess you have kind of like a toolkit for entrepreneurs that you're setting up a business. Here's how we minimize your potential liability. Here's how we minimize your potential tax liability. Here's how we streamline estate planning, etc. That's the kind of thing you do, right?
Exactly. That's what we do for our Access clients.
All right. Well, then I would say you need to go give Scott a call or an email. Scott, people want to reach you, connect with you. What's the best way?
The best way is when we go to our website, which is www.reiblaw.com, REIBLAW.com/financial network. And if you'll do that, we'll have a special page set up there, and you can actually schedule a 20-minute laser session with me to discuss your specific situation. And you can download my ebook, Make Legal Simple, 7 Proven Strategies to Shatterproof Your Business.
All right. I love it. We'll have a link to Scott's email. We'll have a link to Scott's web address there for you, and you can just click through and get right to it. Really appreciate you coming on. If you got a question for Scott, you can shoot me an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. I'll forward it off to Scott. But one thing I urge you is, whatever you do, don't put it off any longer, because time is your enemy. And by the way, don't forget, sign up for our free newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Scott, it's been a total pleasure, privilege, honor. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kerry. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.